The rain hadn't let up for hours. It beat against the narrow windows of station KDRX, the sound blending with the low, endless hum of static inside the control booth. Midnight was approaching, the hour when the world outside felt like it had gone to sleep, and the only people still awake were the insomniacs, the truckers rolling down endless highways, and the lonely voices who called in to talk to Ethan. Ethan leaned back in his chair, headphones hanging half off his ears, the red on-air light glowing above him like a warning beacon. This was his domain, a dusty, two-room studio tucked away on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous, peeling paint, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee always lingering in the air. But it was his. The graveyard shift DJ didn't get much recognition. Most of the station's sponsors wanted the drive time slots when people were commuting. By the time Ethan was on air, the bosses didn't care what he played, so long as the FCC didn't call. That gave him freedom. He spun the tracks he liked, read old poetry when the mood struck, and sometimes he just let the phone lines open and waited for the night to answer. He cleared his throat, leaning into the mic, voice calm and measured. Midnight greetings, folks. You're tuned in to Dead Air Radio, the last voice between you and the storm outside. If you're rolling through town, keep your headlights steady. If you're stuck in bed with the rain pounding your roof, consider this your lullaby. Lines are open. Tell me what's on your mind tonight. He flicked on the call switch, listening to the quiet hiss of an empty line. Usually he'd get the same characters, old Mr. Collins who liked to request Sinatra, or drunk kids daring each other to prank the DJ. But tonight felt different. The station was too quiet. No cars passed on the road outside. Even the rain seemed distant, muffled. Ethan drummed his fingers on the console, glancing at the clock. 11:58 p.m. Then the phone rang. Not a cheerful jingle, just one sharp, shrill ring that seemed to echo too long inside the booth. Ethan jumped, then chuckled to himself. Easy, he muttered, reaching for the receiver. He hit the patch button to put the call on air. KDRX, you're on with Ethan. What's keeping you awake tonight? Static hissed across the line, and for a moment he thought it was dead air. Then, faint, almost whispering, a voice came through. I'd like to make a dedication. Ethan blinked. The voice was neither young nor old. It was strange, flat, calm, almost too calm. Like someone reading words they didn't quite understand. Sure thing, Ethan said, forcing a smile into his voice. Who's the song for? There was a pause. The static deepened. For Melissa Carter. She never made it home. Ethan froze. The name hit him like a bucket of cold water. He hadn't heard it in years. Melissa Carter. She'd been a high school senior who died in a wreck on Route 6 about 20 years ago. Her picture had hung on the wall at the diner for a long time, surrounded by flowers. Ethan cleared his throat, masking the chill running down his spine. And what song would you like for Melissa? The caller didn't answer right away, just heavy static. Then, slowly, play something she can hear. The line went dead. Ethan sat there, heart pounding in the silence of the booth. He pulled the headphones tighter against his ears, listening for a click, a laugh, anything that might reveal it as a prank. Nothing. The phone sat still on its cradle, mute and harmless. Finally, Ethan shook it off, muttering to himself, "Drunk kids, gotta be." He queued up an old record, something soft, somber, and let the music fill the airwaves. But even as the notes played, he couldn't shake the image of that old newspaper clipping, Melissa Carter, a girl who died 2 decades ago, and a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to the living. The storm outside worsened as the night dragged on. The rain was no longer a soft curtain, but a pounding roar that rattled the glass panes. Ethan nursed a lukewarm coffee, trying to shake off the strange dedication. He'd dealt with prank callers before, kids who thought it was hilarious to whisper Bloody Mary into the receiver, or someone breathing heavy like a cliché horror movie villain. But something about that voice gnawed at him. It wasn't playful. It wasn't even emotional. It was hollow. By 1:12 a.m., the booth was quiet again. Ethan was halfway through reading a late-night listener's letter on air when the phone rang a second time. The shrill tone cut through the storm, made him flinch hard enough to spill coffee across the desk. "Damn it," he hissed, grabbing a handful of napkins. He hit the patch button with his elbow. "KDRX, you're on the air. Ethan here," the voice returned. Same flat tone. Same faint static crawling beneath it. At the intersection of Miller and 3rd, a car will not stop. Ethan frowned. "Excuse me? Who is this?" The line hissed. A man driving too fast. A woman crossing. She won't make it. Then silence. Ethan's mouth went dry. He leaned forward, gripping the microphone. "Hey, is this some kind of sick joke? You think scaring people is funny?" No reply, just static. Then the faintest sound, like someone screaming in the far distance before the line went dead. Ethan sat there staring at the phone as if it might start bleeding. His pulse hammered in his ears. He almost reached to call the cops, but what would he even say? "A ghost prank called me?" They'd laugh him off. Instead, he leaned back and forced out a chuckle into the live mic. "Well, folks, looks like we've got another prankster burning the midnight oil. Stay safe out there, especially if you're near Miller and 3rd. Let's take a break with some tunes." He queued up a track with shaking fingers. 15 minutes later, his police scanner crackled. Ethan kept one on the desk for emergencies, a habit from his years in radio. "Dispatch, we've got a pedestrian struck, Miller and 3rd, EMS en route. Driver on scene. Repeat, pedestrian down, Miller and 3rd. The words felt like a punch to the chest. His stomach turned to ice. Ethan ripped the headphones off and slammed them on the desk, heart racing. It had happened, exactly as the voice said. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe the caller was there, maybe they called it in just before he heard it. But then, how did they know? How could they describe the scene before it happened? He replayed the taped call, hands trembling. The station always recorded the lines for liability. He sat in silence, listening to his own voice play back. And then the callers. Flat, calm. Miller and 3rd. The words he remembered exactly. But this time, underneath it, woven into the static, he heard something else. A shriek. Not just noise. A real scream. High, panicked, human. And it was already on the tape before the accident had even happened. Ethan's chest tightened. He shut the playback off and stared at the dark window, his reflection pale in the glass. The storm raged outside, but it wasn't the rain that chilled him anymore. It was the sound of that scream, burned into his ears, hours before the world had caught up to it. The next night, Ethan didn't want to go in. He sat in his car outside the station, headlights pointed at the squat brick building that looked more like a utility shed than a radio hub. The storm had passed, leaving the air cold and heavy. His hand hovered over the keys in the ignition. He thought about calling in sick. He thought about driving away and never coming back. But what would that solve? It wasn't the booth or the static that scared him, it was the phone. And no matter where he went, He knew deep down it would find a way to ring again. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed his coffee thermos and forced himself inside. The first hour was quiet. He played music, read dedications, even got a call from Mr. Collins requesting Sinatra like always. That gave him some relief, proof that normalcy still existed. But then at 12:46 a.m., the phone rang. Ethan froze, hand trembling over the patch button. He considered ignoring it, letting it ring into the void.
But the airwaves were live, and dead air was worse than fear. He pressed the button. KDRX, you're on the air. Static. Then the voice. Fire, South Maple Street. The children won't wake up. Ethan's gut twisted. Who are you? How do you know these things? No response. Just the faintest sound again, almost hidden, like panicked coughing, muffled screams. Then the line went dead. Ethan's chest tightened. He stared at the police scanner, praying it would stay silent. But 10 minutes later, dispatch, multiple calls, house fire, South Maple Street, children trapped inside, engines responding. The thermos slipped from Ethan's hand, coffee spilling across the console. He whispered, "No, no, no, no." Over the next few nights, the pattern continued. Every call was another death waiting to happen. A heart attack at the bowling alley. A man crushed in his garage when his car slipped from the jack. A teenager who drowned in the quarry. Each time Ethan heard it first, the caller describing it, then the distant sounds of it happening before the world caught up. And the worst part? The caller knew things about him. "You remember your brother, don't you?" the voice whispered one night. "The accident. The way you blamed yourself." Ethan's breath caught. His brother, Daniel, had died when they were kids. Drunk driving accident. Ethan had been the one who lent him the keys. Nobody else knew that, not the way this voice did. The phone hissed, then added, "You'll hear your name soon." Ethan became obsessed. He stopped sleeping, surviving on caffeine and cigarettes. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling constantly. He asked the phone company for traces. The engineers tried, but every time they came back with the same result. The calls were coming from a disconnected number. When Ethan pressed harder, they gave him the detail that made his stomach sink. The line was tied to an old roadside payphone on Route 6, the same spot Melissa Carter had died 20 years ago. And that payphone? It had been demolished a decade earlier. The next time the phone rang, Ethan didn't greet it with his usual composure. He slammed the button, voice cracking. "Why me? Why this station? What do you want from me?" The static deepened like a heavy exhale. "You are the voice. You keep them alive. You tell their story. But you can't change it. You can only listen." The line went dead. Ethan sat in the booth, shivering. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. This wasn't random. He wasn't just a witness. He was being chosen. By the fourth night, Ethan looked like a ghost himself, dark rings under his eyes, clothes wrinkled from sleeping in his car, and his voice cracked from chain smoking through the hours. The studio no longer felt like his safe haven. It felt like a trap, a coffin with a phone inside. But he couldn't walk away. Something compelled him to sit in that chair, headphones tight against his ears, waiting for the ring. And of course, it came. 12:19 a.m. The phone's shrill cry cut through the hum of static. Ethan flinched so hard his headphones slipped. He stared at it, sweat beading on his forehead. Finally, he pressed the button. KDRX, Ethan. The voice slithered through the line. Highway 12, red sedan. Headlights off. He won't see the curve. Ethan's pulse spiked. He yanked the mic closer, his voice urgent. Listen to me. If you know this is going to happen, you have to tell me how to stop it. Do you understand? But the only reply was a faint sound. Tires screeching, metal twisting, screams swallowed by static, before the line went dead. Ethan slammed his fist on the console, nearly knocking over the coffee mug beside him. He grabbed the scanner and tuned in frantically. Dispatch, vehicle rollover, Highway 12 near mile marker 6, driver unresponsive. His stomach turned. Too late. Again. The next night, 12:40 a.m. Ring. He snatched the receiver like a starving man. Tell me! Where? Who? The voice was waiting. A man in blue, working late. He won't come home. The elevator doors will not open.
Ethan froze. A vision flashed in his mind. The Merrick Building, the tallest downtown. Only a few offices kept their lights on overnight. He didn't hesitate. He cut the live feed mid-song, grabbed his coat, and bolted out into the rain-slicked streets. His tires squealed as he tore down empty avenues, the radio scanner buzzing beside him. He parked crooked in front of the Merrick Building and ran inside, heart thundering. The security guard blinked in surprise, but Ethan didn't stop. He jabbed at the elevator buttons, then the stairwell. On the 6th floor landing, he found it. A man in a suit slumped half inside the open elevator, eyes wide in panic, gasping for air. His briefcase was spilled, papers soaking in the rainwater that leaked from above. Ethan dropped beside him, fumbling his phone. Hang on! Stay with me. Minutes later, paramedics swarmed the scene. One muttered something about a cardiac arrest, seconds away from death if not for the quick call. Ethan stood back, chest heaving as they loaded the man onto a stretcher. For once, he had beaten the voice. He had stopped it. Or so he thought. When he returned to the station, soaked and shaking, the phone was already ringing. He answered with trembling hands. The voice was different now, clearer, sharper. You interfered. Ethan's throat went dry. I saved him. You don't control this. A long pause, then. You think you can change the end? All you did was delay it. And then beneath the static, another sound, a new one. The unmistakable flat line of a heart monitor. The following nights, the calls came faster, 2, 3, 4 per shift. A drowning at Miller Lake, a factory worker caught in a machine, a woman falling down her stairs while clutching her baby. Ethan called 911 for each one. Sometimes he was right. Sometimes by the time authorities arrived, it was too late. The more he tried to intervene, the worse it became. His bosses noticed the strange interruptions on air, the frantic tone in his broadcasts. They threatened to fire him if he didn't get it together. But Ethan knew if he walked away, the calls would still come. And if no one answered, who would hear the warnings? One night, 2:03 a.m., the call cut through the booth again. Ethan's hand hovered over the button, sweat dripping down his temple. He pressed it. The voice was waiting, calm, almost pleased. A man in a blue truck. He won't make it home tonight. Ethan's heart dropped. He knew that truck. Don't you dare, he whispered. Don't you touch him. But the voice only repeated, slower this time. He won't make it. The line clicked off. Ethan bolted from the booth. He didn't even grab his coat.
Rain hammered down as he raced toward the back roads, tires hissing on wet asphalt. His friend's truck, a faded blue Chevy, appeared ahead, weaving slightly as it climbed the hill. Ethan laid on the horn, flashing his high beams, trying to warn him. Then, in the corner of his eye, Ethan saw it. Headlights, barreling from the opposite lane, too fast, too close. He swerved his own car onto the shoulder, bracing for impact, but somehow, miraculously, the blue truck skidded sideways, missing the oncoming car by inches. It slammed into the guardrail, smoke pouring from the hood. Ethan leapt out, pulling his friend from the wreckage just as flames licked up from under the engine. His friend coughed, dazed but alive. Ethan collapsed beside him, rain mixing with tears. For the second time, he had beaten the voice. Or had he? Back at the station, soaked and trembling, the phone was ringing again. When Ethan answered, the voice was waiting, colder than ever. You were not supposed to stop it. Next time, it will be you. The station smelled of mildew and burnt coffee. Ethan hadn't gone home in days. His reflection in the dark window didn't even look like him anymore. Eyes bloodshot, skin pale, stubble patching his jaw like mold creeping across stone. He sat slouched in the chair, staring at the phone, waiting, because he knew it would ring. It always rang. The minutes crawled past midnight. The air inside the booth was thick, suffocating, like breathing cotton. He almost convinced himself it wasn't coming this time. Maybe it was finally over. Then the phone screamed. Ethan jumped so hard his chair rolled back into the wall. His heart slammed against his ribs. He stared at the flashing light on the console. 1 ring, 2, 3. His hand shook as he picked it up, pressing the button with trembling fingers. KDRX, he whispered, barely able to speak. The voice was waiting, clearer than ever before, calm, cold. You've interfered too many times. You've tried to bend the pattern. But there is no escape. Ethan swallowed hard, gripping the mic like a lifeline. You don't control this. You don't control me. The static deepened, filling the booth like a growl, and then the voice spoke again, softer. The next name is Ethan Cole. Ethan froze. His throat went dry. His name. His name. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt heavy, useless. No. No, that's not how this works. I hear it, but I can fight it. I can fight it. But then he heard it. Through the static, layered beneath the hiss, came his own voice, screaming, choking, begging for help. It was him, already recorded, already echoing through the line. He ripped the headphones off, heart hammering, but the sound didn't stop. It was coming from everywhere, the monitors, the walls, even the dead air itself. His own voice crying out from a place that hadn't happened yet. Ethan stumbled from the booth, running down the dark hallway of the station. But as he reached the exit door, he froze. Through the glass pane, he saw himself, standing outside in the rain, soaked, pale, staring in at him with hollow eyes. The figure opened its mouth, and the same scream he'd just heard on the line poured out, muffled through the glass. Ethan staggered back, slamming the door shut. His head spun, his lungs burned. He stumbled into the booth again, clutching at the console for support. The phone was still off the hook, the line alive, and through it the voice whispered, "You cannot run from the static." The lights flickered, the power surged. For a moment, all of KDRX went silent. Then, the last thing anyone listening that night heard, just before the station cut to dead air, was Ethan's own voice, warped and distant, broadcasting across the town like an echo from the grave. And that concludes tonight's tale of Dead Air. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more people discover our campfire. Drop a comment below and tell me what you'd do if you heard your name whispered over the radio. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story from Campfire Horror Stories. Every like, every comment, every subscription keeps the fire burning and means the world to this growing channel. Until next time, stay safe out there and don't listen too closely to the static.